We're in the Dynasty Fantasy Football offseason, and it's time to start looking at these players, looking at their values, whether they've increased, decreased, and see what we want to do with them on the market. Some of these players are stashes, some of these are pickups, some of these are sells, but it's really up to you and what you want to do in your league. But I'm going to bring up 3 players today that we're going to look at their values, look at their situation, and then after that, you'll see what you want to do with them. But before we do that, you need to click that subscribe button. Tap it with the finger on the phone. Click it with the mouse on your computer because I'm going hot and heavy for these rookie drafts all off season long. I want to help you build your dynasty leagues all off season long by looking at these players, looking at the values, covering the news like we always do. Click that button. Stop missing out. But our first player today, he started going off on the back end of the season because the opportunities opened up. He took advantage of them, and he might have some value next year. He might not. He's a cheap asset to get right now. More expensive than what he was before due to what he was doing these last few weeks, that last month. However, you might be looking at him as a get or a stash or a guy you're holding or maybe even a sell in these next few weeks. As we go deeper into the offseason, that player we're looking at here is Zamir White. Zamir White did well on the back end of the season as we look at the numbers here because Josh Jacobs was out. 17.5 fantasy points against the Chargers, 14.5 against the Chiefs, 15.6 against the Colts, week 18, 13.1, and he was seeing opportunities here, 21 or more touches and targets on that run he had there, giving him plenty of opportunities to score fantasy points, which is good to see. And looking at Josh Jacobs, he's going to be a free agent. Do they bring him back? Do they sign him again? It was rough getting that contract done, but they do love to run him to death, and he may go back, he may not. However, you got to look at this tenfold here as an investment. He's still kind of on the cheap where you can invest in Zamir White, hope that Josh Jacobs goes off to somewhere else, and maybe you can capitalize. However, when we're looking at these values here, and we're looking at the contracts here for Zamir White, 2025 is his last year with the Raiders, so a long-term play is something you may not be looking at, but it is the running back position. I look at the running back position more like redraft. I look more to year, and I just try to get the assets as cheap as possible. And it's really how cheap can you get Zamir White, or can you sell him for a profit? Is that a possibility? Because looking at this depth chart, if Josh Jacobs moves on, and this running back draft class that's coming in is categorized as a not-so-great one, Zamir White could be walking into some workload. Sure, they'll probably draft the back, but looks like he's earned some workload if Josh Jacobs goes to greener pastures, hits free agency, catches that deal. But on the flip side, he could sign. So this is an opportunity where you might catch Zamir White on the cheap because there is a chance Josh Jacobs re-signs, and if he re-signs, Zamir White's value will fall a little bit. However, if he's gone, Zamir White's value goes up, and now you got the opportunity to trade in the offseason, get you some more assets. So right now you're playing the gamble game, and if you want to play the gamble game, go jump right on in. How far will it jump up? You're probably going to get a considerable draft pick looking at the values right now because right now he's the RB34 per keep trade cut. A lot of people don't like keep trade cut, but right now it's a free-flowing market that kind of gives us an indicator of how a player is being valued. And over the last few weeks, it's been running with his production, with his opportunities, and what could possibly happen this offseason. That being said, if Josh Jacobs moves on, he's going to go higher than RB34 in value, and you can move on from that, or you can hold and see if we can get that production, those opportunities that we saw in the back end of the season. It's up to you what you want to do. And really, if that happens, what I'm doing, I'm kicking the tires to see what comes back to me. If I get a first for that, if I get a good first, or if that allows me to move up substantially in my rookie draft, I'm probably doing it. I'm probably looking at that. If I can't get anything back, then I'm holding. And it's just common sense, really. You just got to see what happens. But the thing is, do you want to invest now? Because right now he's the 136th player off the board per keep trade cut. His dynasty value isn't through the roof yet. It's just right at that palatable price point. You would like to get him a little cheaper, like back in November, October, early December range. That's over with. You would like to get him at that price point, but that's not going to happen. You're going to have to pay up more than what you would have the last few months. But still, you're going to catch him at a decent price point to gamble with. That gamble could run bad. It could run bad. Josh Jacobs resigns, or they sign a Derrick Henry, or they do something like that. Draft the running back on day 2. Now he's got competition, and he plummets. But that's baked into the price right now, because if everything was for certain, he'd be a lot higher than 136th overall. That being said, when you're looking at players in this range, the 2026 early second-round pick is a little bit above him. You can probably kick the tires and see what comes back at you draft pick-wise. I feel like a second's going to be hard to do, and you're not going to want to do it. You're going to feel good with a third, maybe, because you're trying to gamble with the stock. Let me know in the comments what you're willing to pay for Zamir White, because there is a gamble right now. If you have him on your roster, you're either kicking the tires, see what comes back at you, or you're holding. It really depends on your league. Not all leagues are as liquid as what people say or make them out to be. A lot of people are online talking about buy and sell players like this, but players are not as liquid as what people make them out to be. But Zamir White is looking like he could be catching some opportunities, or you can catch a dynasty manager sleeping, and maybe you can catch him on the cheap, maybe with a mid-third or something, maybe. And it's not going to go with all leagues. You're going to have to kick the tires, see what comes back at you. Maybe you got a young prospect you're not into, or you're overloaded at wide receiver, and you got this wide receiver, you know he's going to hang out wide receiver 30, 40, 50 range, and you want to play with this penny stock here. Maybe you can sneak him by. But that's why we kick the tires. That's why we look and see if we can get these deals done. But we're going to be looking at a wide receiver now, a rookie who might be stepping in a situation if the draft goes his way. So we got a lot of variables coming up this offseason that could allow him to see an increase in production next year, opportunities, dynasty value, and his dynasty value might increase over these next few weeks due to free agency. And that player that we're looking at, Trey Palmer. Trey Palmer of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's cheap. He's a cheap investment. He might be on your roster and you're waiting for somebody to talk about him because you're looking at him and you're like, he didn't do too much this year. He really didn't, but he did get some opportunities. He did score a little bit of production, 10 points in week 4, 18.4 in week 17. And then you're seeing the targets come in there, 7, 6, 5, 4. So he is getting some volume as a rookie, which is a good indicator to see. He did not flatline completely. And then the air yards, 154 in week 6 against Detroit, 104 in week 17. And that's where his game lies because he's got 4.3 speed. He's a deep ball guy. And if he sees the field just with a little bit more of an increased opportunity, that could lead to him being a splash play off and on throughout the season that you gamble with in your lineup. And that could be an increased investment for you depending on what you paid for. Or if you're holding and stashing and you need the confirmation bias. It's whatever you want because we're going to be covering everybody here. But Mike Evans is more than likely off. He's more than likely going to a Super Bowl contender or at least a team that's highly competitive. And he deserves it. Hall of Fame wide receiver. So that's going to open up some opportunities. Not just Palmer for targets, snaps, opportunities to score fantasy points because they could bring somebody in later. But that could bring up opportunities for us in value because the perceived value, if he moves on the greener pastures, people are going to talking up Trey Palmer. That being said, there's going to be some leagues out there where the price increases to a certain point that you want to make the deal. or you feel a little bit better of holding him. It's whatever you want to do. That deal could be you buying him. That deal could be you selling him. You could sell him. He's a late round pick, late round prospect. Odds of a late round prospect holding on for a long term isn't that great. You may want to sell off. If the price gets high, early third, second round, wherever it is, we got to watch the market. We got to see what happens. You may be saying to yourself, I do not see that happening in your league, and that's very true. That probably isn't. But you got to watch the market because that could happen in some leagues if things get out of control, because we've seen that with players. But also, with Trey Palmer here, you may catch a dynasty manager napping here, seeing the situation going forward, which shouldn't be happening, but it does happen. Looking at Chris Godwin, his contract is getting a little bit ambiguous going forward. Should be with the Buccaneers, but still you want to pay attention with him. He's also not getting any younger. I'm not saying he's super old because we're seeing older wide receivers still be productive in the league. That being said, pay attention to him because that could lead to opportunities for Trey Palmer as well. Trey Palmer does have upside. He's a very good wide receiver, and in looking at the depth chart here, if Mike Evans moves on, which is highly likely, high probability, at least the market's going to run to this depth chart, see his name, see his upside, and some people are going to want to buy in. Some people are going to want to push the value up, and you might be able to capitalize one way or another. You may be able to capitalize now, or you may be able to capitalize in the future if Mike Evans does move on. But looking at his rankings now, 185th overall. He's cheap. He's for a song. You can catch him at a very low cost value. Wide receiver 67. Might be even a throw-in in some trades. Say you're getting a bigger deal done, you might be able to catch him as a throw-in, or a throw-in if the other guy throws in a very cheap pick or something. You got to work with that a little bit. But again, the price could increase immensely from wide receiver 67 to maybe like wide receiver 50 range, wide receiver 40 range, and maybe, possibly, you can catch value with that. If your league's not liquid, then you're really going to have to choose your spots. But still, wide receiver 67, there's a good opportunity here that in the next few months that rises. Maybe wide receiver 50 range, 55 range, somewhere around there, maybe a little bit more. You got to pay attention, watch the tea leaves, see if you can capitalize off that. And then we're looking at the values here. At the top here, you got a 2024 mid-third. So that's the values, and he's going a little bit later than that in drafts and ADP. That being said, maybe a late third, early fourth, mid-fourth. Do you want to spend that? Do you want the liquidity? Do you just want to dust them off and move on? Are you waiting for the Mike Evans news to drop and see if you can get more than a mid-third? That's another thing to look at it. I got him on my roster, and I see this as an opportunity to get some assets on my team because I'm rebuilding a middle of the road. Mike Evans is moving on. Maybe I can get more than that mid-third listed there. That's another marker to look at it. That's another way to engineer it. That being said, maybe you can get in the second round range. Maybe a back end second. Maybe another pick. Maybe another player. But again, kick the tires, see what happens. But there's a lot of opportunity here with Trey Palmer. Really, he's forecasted to gain value over the next few weeks and months. Now it's time to talk about our garbage bin player. And you may be thinking, hey, we've been talking about garbage bin players all along. These are some cheap players. We're going even cheaper because you know what? We do a lot of trades. We want throw-ins. Throw-ins are big deals because you just inch your way to a better team that way. You get an asset there to look at, see what happens with. They're liquid. You can do stuff with them. You can funnel them back into picks. There's a lot of things you can do with those cheap players. We cannot forget about those players who are on the back end of rosters or even on waivers in some leagues that are just sitting there because there's some opportunity to cash in on the market. Maybe not now, but possibly in the future, or it's a dead play, but a throw-in. A throw-in, talking about that, is a player that just gets added to a trade. He's just on the back end of the roster. Your trade's working in. It's a bigger deal, and you're like, you know what? As a sweetener, can you throw in this guy, player X? You know you're never going to use him. You know he's wasting space right now. Can you add him into the deal? Your roster will open up. You'll be able to pick up another player who's very comparable to this guy. Can I have them? I can add them to my roster right now. Can you sweeten that for me? That's the type of deal we're looking at here. And the player we're talking about right now, Pierre Strong. And because there's some upside here that could be had, and the opportunities, although they're not grand. Nick Chubb should be back. That injury was long ago to where he should be fully recovered before the start of the season. We also have Jerome Ford looking good. The thing about this, he's a bargain getting player. He's not a must get. He's not a must buy. He's not a must sell. He's the back end of your roster. You don't get content much on YouTube talking about the back end of your roster. I'm that guy for you. And you got to look at the market on these players, and you have to galaxy brain that out. Looking at his production, it wasn't there. The Browns traded for him right before the season started. He had to acclimate to the team. The fact that he was able to see the field and get snaps, be able to do something, breathe on the grass, is enough for me to say, hey, maybe after another strong offseason, another strong camp, maybe he gets some opportunities if we see injuries in this backfield again. Nick Chubb's not getting younger. Jerome Ford saw a lot of touches this year. Maybe, because we know how running backs work. If you can catch a cheap running back with upside, you're going to want to run with it, because this guy saw some opportunities off and on throughout the year due to the ambiguous nature of this offense, and maybe another year in the system keeps Kareem Hunt at bay. They do not want to pay for Kareem Hunt again. They don't want to do that. If something happens to Chubb and they got to go back to this situation again, they want to go with Ford and Pierre Strong. That's what they want to do. Pierre Strong does have some upside. They traded for him for a reason, but again, they're not going to be scared to cut bait, but you're not paying for him. You're looking to get him at dirt cheap prices. So these are the players we're looking at here. And why we like the upside here is the 4.3 speed, very productive at South Dakota State, has okay draft capital, but he was drafted with the Patriots under that old regime now. Since Belichick's gone, 4.22 draft pick there. But again, the Browns got him in trade. Although it was cheap, we got upside here with the speed score, with the burst score, and now a full offseason, hopefully, in the Browns organization. Pierre Strong could be a player you want to look at. Looking at this depth chart, though, Jerome Ford, Kareem Hunt, Pierre Strong, Deion Jackson, Nick Chubb. And I can tell you this, they got a theme here. Deion Jackson, size-adjusted athleticism. Nick Chubb, size-adjusted athleticism. Pierre Strong, size-adjusted athleticism. Jerome Ford, solid running back prospect. Kareem Hunt, on the way out of the NFL. He got picked up right after that Nick Chubb injury. That being said, there's some upside here that could be sneaky as a pickup. He's being drafted about 300th overall. That's how cheap he is. Very cheap, RB75 in value, so he's worth nothing. He is nothing right now in Dynasty. He might even be on the waiver wire, which is okay. He's not a must pickup. However, looking at things going forward, what if Nick Chubb starts off slow? What if his injury has a hiccup? What if they put the kids' gloves on and it looks like he's not going to start the season, but all of a sudden he does? Strong's value goes up, and then you can flip him for 250 overall, and you're able to liquidate a guy that was a throw-in, a pickup off waivers, or however cheap he was, for a 4th-round pick, 3rd-round pick. You can just inch your way up with stuff like that. Galaxy braining this out for the future in the next few weeks and months. We're going to be talking about a lot of players like this, not just a few. I'm not picking out players because I like them. I'm picking out players because I'm helping you guys gauge the market. RB75. Look at his values. The market says, hey, we like this player. He's just not doing anything. That's what the market's saying. We like this player. We just need him to do something. And if you look at the chart here, it's trickling up a little bit as we get to the off season, because some people are seeing it the way I'm seeing it. They're looking at him as a young guy, good size, adjusted athleticism, and running backs get hurt, and that could pop for him, especially another offseason in the offense. And then looking at the values here for him, he's dirt cheap. Mid-4th rounder in 2026. Cheaper than that, technically, per ADP. You can really get him for cheap, but that's not my suggestion. My suggestion is to try to get him as a throw-in piece, or even cheaper than that. That's my suggestion. I would not be willing and dealing my picks right now because those are going to gain value. Pierre Strong is going to get a little bit cheaper, but you can't get any cheaper than a throw-in or pick up off waivers, 300th off the board, right above Tommy DeVito. That's how cheap he is. And I'm not saying he's going to go off or anything like that, but this could be a stock where we get deeper into the offseason that might increase a little bit to where if you picked him up or got him as a throw-in, you can get him for a mid-4th or something like that, late 3rd or whatever. If you really kick the tires and got creative, you can get a tiny return on investment. That's if your league is liquid. If your league is stale, good luck. You might need a new league, because if your league's not trading, if your league's not kicking the tires, if there's not a deal done every couple weeks or even more than that, you're probably in a boring league and you probably need to move on maybe, or get in another league that's a little bit more active, because activity is what keeps this alive throughout the offseason into the season. But those are 3 players we're looking at today. We're looking at the value. We're looking at the market. Buy, sell, hold, trade, stash, whatever you want to do with them. This is what I'm going to be doing every week. I'm going to be looking at the players probably multiple times a week, and we're seeing whether we want to buy them, sell, hold due to the market value, and then trying to predict the future market value over the off season. In season's different. We're going to speculate a little bit over that. But still, we're going over the player values. We're going to be going over the cheaper guys as well, because a lot of people don't talk about them, and we want to go deep because that is something that's being missing, especially here on YouTube. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If there's a player you want me to talk about, if you made it this far, drop that in the comments. If you made it this far, you need to hit that subscribe button, because I definitely kept you entertained, because I was talking for a good clip about these players. But I want to thank you for watching. Catch you on the next video.